All right, guys, so we've got the Phanteks EVOLV X2 Matrix here. And you may remember from early last year, the EVOLV X2 came out and I did a build in the white version and the finished build ended up looking absolutely amazing. But we've got the EVOLV X2 Matrix now and it actually has a hidden LED matrix behind this fabric right here. So we'll have to see how that looks once we get the build all done and settled with the software. So I'm not gonna go too in-depth on this case because it isn't really that new besides the LED matrix, but we've got a 3-piece glass design with glass on the side, glass on the front, and also glass on the back. And you can see we've got this really large window over here, which actually looks really cool from the front because if you're using a large GPU, it kind of hangs over and it's a really interesting look. And it's also really tall and it's not really that wide, but it is very tall. So very interesting case. And we also have this really interesting platform down here. We've got some of our IO over here, including 2 USB type A USB-C and an audio port. And then if you look at the top, we've got a power button and then we've also got a reset button. And then we've got some mesh up here with this interesting design. And the rear is also pretty funky as well. It's kind of sunken in and you can see we've got some straps right here. So everything coming out of our motherboard, we can kind of cleanly put it through these straps and coming down this way. Then here's for our rear fan. And you actually put the screws in for the rear fan through these longer points right here on the case, which is kind of hard to show, but you kind of have to feed the screw all the way through to your fan. It's a really interesting look. We've got our PCIe slot covers. Power supply is going to sit horizontal down here, but I say we get these panels taken off and kind of map out our build and see what the inside looks like. All right, so removing all the panels is super easy. The top panel is toolless and you can just go ahead and pop it off. And then once you do, it's gonna reveal 2 screws. You've got one right here and then you've got one right here. And once removed, you can take off both of these glass panels. And then the front one, you've got a screw right here. You remove that. And there's also a little panel right here and you can just go ahead and pop that off and that'll reveal this screw right here. So once you get those out, you can kind of shimmy the front panel to the right and go ahead and remove it. And then if we take a look back here, we have this door. So we've got this little push thing right here and then we can go ahead and swing it out and that will reveal all of our cable management area. We've got our PSU tray down there and then this can be removed as well. It's basically just sitting on hinges so we can just pull this up and I'm gonna put this to the side for now. So now we've got full access to the build. And this case is really easy to build and you can see I've got all this room right here, but we can fit 3 120 millimeter fans down at the bottom. We can fit a 120 millimeter fan on the rear and up to 3 120 millimeter fans up top. And you can also fit up to a 360 millimeter radiator at the top. And then you can see here is our motherboard tray and we can fit up to ATX motherboards. And then we've got these little grommets right here for all of our cable pass-through to make them look as clean as possible. And then we also have a built-in GPU sag bracket. And it's kind of color matched to the case itself, which looks great. And then just speaking of the case, this fabric looks really, really nice. So even if you're not using the LED matrix, this actually looks really clean. I really like the look of this. So really cool looking case. And then if we take a look at our cables back here, they're a little bit of a mess right now, but I say we go ahead and get those cleaned up and get it prepared for our motherboard and then just move along with the build and see what happens. Okay, so the motherboard is in and it looks great, and we've got pretty much everything wired up. We've got our USB-C, we've got our USB-A, we've got our front panel connector down here. We've got USB, which I assume is going to be for our LED matrix. And then we also do have a 5-volt ARGB for the case. The only one I didn't plug in is HD audio, but there's really no need to plug it in. So I just decided to leave it out because I'm never gonna use HD audio anyways. But the motherboard looks great, but let's go ahead and take a look at the back. So we have some preliminary cable management that happened. I did tuck a lot of cables into here so we can have a nice, even, and like short run down here. And not all of them are perfectly managed. You can see I still got some coming out. But once we get the motherboard cables in, like the 24 pin, and the CPU cables, I should be able to tighten those up. And you can see I've got them all zip tied right here, and I apologize, it's not focusing. There we go. So I've got them zip tied right here, so I'm gonna have them kind of come over to here. And you can see we have a cable slop over there, but the nice thing is we have this panel right here, and once this is fitted here, if I could do this with one hand, there we go. So that's in place, and you can see that's gonna hide all of that. So it's just clean down here. So I think we should move on to getting the fans installed and get some more cable management done. So the bottom fans are installed, and these basically just bolt to a bracket that's on the bottom. And then once the bracket is in place, you just tighten this thumb screw. So if you want to take it out, you remove this thumb screw, and then you can kind of shimmy the bottom bracket out, mount your fans to it, and then put it back in. And then you're going to tighten this thumb screw. And these fans use 2 PWM cables, and I've actually got them plugged into the motherboard right there. And then all of the excess cable is kind of tucked in this gap right here. So let's see if I can get a better angle. So all the excess cable is just shoved down into this crack right here. So it looks really clean, and you can hardly see those 2 cables right there. And I was going to use a rear fan, but these fans have a receiver that sticks out the side. So you can see we've got a little bit of a bump, and these actually do not fit in here, and no matter any orientation I've tried. So we're not going to be running a rear fan. So just in case you are planning on building in this case, you probably want a fan that has like a hardwired in cable, because with this little bump on the end, this is not going to fit here. But it's actually not the end of the world. We're not going to run a rear fan. So when this build's all done, we're going to have 3 intake at the bottom and then 3 exhaust at the top for some nice neutral pressure. And then you can run a rear fan as intake for positive pressure, but most people run it as exhaust, so it would be negative pressure. So we'll just leave it like this. It actually doesn't look too bad. We'll see how it looks with the finished build, but it'd be cool to maybe like put a screen in here or something, but that's kind of an odd size, and I don't think there's anything on the market like that. So moving on to the back, we've got our power supply installed, and we've got a lot of loose cables right here. Let me put these to the side. So PSU is installed. We've got our 24 plugged in right there, and then we've got our CPU cables going over here, and then I've got my GPU cables dangling over here, and there is a SATA cable, but it's actually tucked back there, so it's a little bit messy down here, but I'm going to finish this up once the build is all done. But you can kind of see how it's going to look. It is really clean. My camera doesn't seem to like to focus on anything I want it to, so overall it's starting to look really, really clean. And then we'll finish that up once we're done. So now I think it's time to move on to the next step. And I believe the next step is going to be the CPU cooler. So we've got our radiator, and then we've also got the pump block, and we'll get that installed, and then we're actually almost done here. So let's go ahead and get to it. All right guys, so the build is all done, and the first thing I like to do when I finish a build now is I like to show how it looks in the dark. And right now I only have my 2 overhead lights on right now, and they're actually set very dim, but this is how the Phanteks EVOLV X2 Matrix looks in the dark, and I honestly really like how it looks. I do have it set to an orange RGB right now, and I have the brightness set very low. So hopefully it's not too bright on camera. I think the only thing that's gonna come off kind of bright is the RGB strip that goes throughout the case. So hopefully that's not too bright for you guys. I apologize if it is, but I do think this looks good. But let's go ahead and turn on the lights and then keep talking about the finished build. All right, so all of my studio lights are now on, and I think the build still looks great. And even with all this lighting, you can see the LED matrix is still very easy to read. So whether you're playing in a dark room or a well-lit room, it's still really easy to read the screen. And it is really clean. And it also moves very smoothly. I don't know how this exactly functions, but the movement going to the left here is very smooth. It doesn't appear choppy or anything. I am filming in 30 FPS, so it may come off a little weird on camera, although it looks good on my screen, but in person it looks really clean. But the build looks great, guys. I really do like this fabric. And one thing about this case is, if you didn't want to use the LED matrix, I think it would look great without it, because this looks absolutely amazing. I really like this fabric they use. So even if you're not using the LED matrix, you'd still just have that really nice fabric look. And I think it looks really classy. I like the black and gray contrast, and I think it looks really good with the build. So even if you're planning to get this case and you're unsure of whether you use the LED matrix, well, you have the option to turn it on, or you have the option to turn it off, and it will still look great. So really cool looking build. I do really like the orange RGB. And then one thing about this case that I want to talk about right now is, let's take a look at the back. So this is probably going to be really hard to show on camera because this is all glass. But right now I have all of the cable management exposed, because if you saw earlier, you get this door right here. So this door, once you finish your build, you can actually put this on, and this will hide the entirety of your cable management. But since my cable management is really clean, I decided to leave the door off. So now we can fully see all of our cable management behind this dark tinted glass. And I apologize for all the reflections. I'm trying to get some good angles that show it. That one's actually not bad right there, but now you can see my panel light. But I think this is really cool. And I honestly wish more cases had this right here. So for the people that do their cable management extremely well, you have a window to see it. And I know you're not going to see the back of your PC often, but at the same time, I still think this is really cool. So for all those cable management nerds like me, you can leave this door off and the glass panel closes with no issues. And I honestly think it just looks really cool. But if your cable management's terrible, you can go ahead and put on the door and you actually wouldn't be able to see any of this at all. You just have a black panel right there hiding it all. But let's go ahead and take off the panels and start talking about the finished build and everything else. So the build consists of a Ryzen 7800 X3D, and that's being cooled by the Li ALC 360mm AIO. And I'm not sure if this cooler is still available. I'll link it down below if it is, but it's a really simple cooler that I really like because it's got that gunmetal gray finish, which I think matches a ton of builds. And it's just really simple. We just had that one ring of RGB and the Li logo lights up. So really clean looking cooler. And because we've got this LED matrix, I really didn't want to do a screen on the AIO. So the LED matrix can be like our main focus point. So really cool cooler. And if it's still available, like I said, I will link it down below, but I really like how this looks. And then as far as the motherboard, we've got a Strix B850. We've got 32 gigabytes of custom Corsair Labs RAM. And I really hate to talk about RAM right now because of the current situation. It's obviously pretty dire, but this is a really cool custom pattern that's black, gray, and red. And then underneath that heatsink on the motherboard, we've got a WD Black, I believe it's an SN750X, and it's either 1 or 2 terabytes, but I'll link the proper one down below, or one that I find is a better fit if you're planning on replicating this build. And then we've got an Asus Tough Gaming 9070 XT, and we've got those 3 8-pins, which looks really clean with these cables, and I'll talk about the power supply and cables in just a bit. And then the fans are the Li CL Wireless. So these are actually the cheaper versions of the SL and TL fans, and honestly, I really like them. They have that continuous lighting going all the way throughout on the sides right here, and then also the blades are lit up. So I think they look really good. So we've got 3 reverse blade on the bottom for intake, then we've got 3 regular blade on the top for exhaust. So right now we have neutral pressure, 3 intake, 3 exhaust. Then like I said earlier, we couldn't fit a rear fan in this build because of these fans and the transmitter that's on them. So keep that in mind if you are planning a fan for the rear. Just make sure it's got a hardwired in cable and it doesn't have like a receiver that has like a bump in it, because a 120mm fan just basically fits in this little cavity perfect. But honestly, I don't hate how it looks. It honestly doesn't look as bad as I thought. I thought it would look really empty, but I think with that kind of grating look, or not grating look, but those grates right there, those vertical lines in it, I honestly think it looks really cool. But let me know what you guys think of it down in the comments. So the front of the build looks great, and I think I went over all of the components up here. And like always, I'll have them all linked down in the description. So let's turn this around and take a look at the cable management. And as always, this turned out absolutely phenomenal. Got our power supply down here, and this is the Phanteks Revolt 1200 watt. Then we've got their custom PSU cables. So these PSU cables actually come separate, and once again, I'm not sure if this PSU and the cables are still available. These might be old stock for Phanteks, so I'm not 100% sure, but the cables are really, really nice quality. So you can see we've got our GPU cables going this way, and then through this way, we've got our motherboard 24 pin, and that's going over here. And then we've got our CPU cables going over here, and then all of our IO cables. So up here was the power button and reset button. So we've got those cables coming down right here, and those are kind of all behind here. And most of them are going behind this little group of cables and going towards the motherboard and plugging into their respective slots. But the cable management is really clean. Then we do have this panel taken off right now, and it's gonna be hard to show because it's probably really dark, but all my cables are pretty much bunched up over here. So once this panel is on, all of this is not visible at all. And then you're just left with this right here, which looks really good. I've got this tucked really nice, and I've also got them zip tied nice and tight. So it's really clean. And then like I said earlier, you could just run the glass panel if you wanted. So you can fully leave off this door, but let me go ahead and grab it real quick and see if I can do this one-handed. This is probably gonna be very difficult to do. Okay, so I had to put the camera down in order to get that door back on. Then I also did put this panel on back here, but let's just say you don't care to see your cable management, or it looks really bad or whatever. You can go ahead and put this door back on, and then you can just go ahead and close this. If I can close it, there we go. So you can close this, and now you can't see anything. So there's no cables showing at all. And then obviously the glass panel would go on. And honestly, it's a really cool look. But if you do have nice cable management, you can just go ahead and open this door up. You can take this off. I'm gonna put this down. And then now we've got our clean cable management exposed. So you can kind of go either way. So I think it looks cool like this. But if you don't care at all, which 90 to 95% of people do not care about cable management, you can just go ahead and put the door on, and then you'll never see it again until you take that panel off. So I think it's cool we kind of have both options, and I kind of wish more cases were like this, where it was a glass back panel and your cable management was exposed, because that would obviously expose some of the cable managers out there that aren't doing the cleanest job possible. But at the same time, I definitely have some OCD when it comes to cable management. And I was also a mechanic for a long time for Toyota. So doing harnesses, especially like engine bay and interior harnesses, is what I did a lot of. So those you have to make sure that everything is routed perfectly. So I think a lot of that rubbed off on me. And I always make my cable management look really good. But I think it's worth it, to be honest. But let me know what you guys think of the cable management down below. Do you think I go too far? This honestly doesn't even take me that long. I probably spent about maybe an extra 30 minutes doing the cable management. And that was like while filming the build and doing everything else, but I'm definitely a bit over the top. But overall, I really like this build, guys. And then as far as the Matrix, I'm not gonna show too much of it, but you can do pretty much whatever you want. You can have text scrolling like this. You can have different media. You can have a whole bunch of different things. You can even have different vitals like CPU and GPU temperatures, but I'm not gonna show too much of that off. But right now I've just got it saying Dankamyouknow, but I do think it's a really cool case, and it's kind of awkward because it's really, really tall, but it's really thin. So it should fit within most people's setups because height is usually not an issue. I mean, maybe if you put it under your desk, but usually height is not the big concern when it comes to cases. It's usually just width and depth. So overall, I think it's a cool looking case and worth looking into. But let me know what you guys think of it down in the comments. Let me know what you think of the finished build. Like the video, subscribe if you enjoy my content, share it with your friends, and then I'll see y'all in the next video.